I invite you to pray with me. Beloved one, heart of our heart, be our vision, be our steadfast pathway. As we learn to live into your call to love each other, our neighbor, and our planet well, help us be mindful of that heavenly kingdom that we ever so attempt to create on this planet as we renew our streams, our waters, and our own heart's fire for you. Amen. I invite you to be seated. On Friday at around 10:30 in the morning, 50 students at Los Altos High School walked out to march for the climate strike. 100 students at Kacei also walked out. A team of folks from University Lutheran all gathered together and took the train to go to the San Jose climate strike. In our own Palo Alto, people came from all over on their bikes, by feet, with signs saying there is no planet B, chanting things like no justice, no peace. 4 million people all over the globe marched on Friday. And they marched at the call of Greta Thunberg, who is a Swedish high schooler who has been missing high school on Fridays to bring awareness to the Earth's climate crisis. Part of her platform is that we must disrupt daily life to bring awareness to the corporations and our governments that are funding the exploitation of our planet's resources. But her call is just one of hundreds of voices of activists who over the years have been working towards justice and right relationship with the earth for years. The enormous mass of people who came out on Friday's climate strike, to me, felt like a huge momentum shift. One of the PhD students who I work with at Stanford said, "I think that what has impacted me more than anything, more than the thousands of people marching all over the world, was hearing that one of my friends, who is also a PhD candidate, was not just going to the San Jose climate strike, but also the Palo Alto one. He's one of my peers," she said. "He's a student with deadlines and so many things to do, who is busy just like me, and he showed up." And he showed up with a sign that says, "Economists agree on the carbon tax." Seeing her peer make a drastic life change to call attention to climate change seemed to wake this student up, who, even though she was extremely busy, also felt drawn herself to go to a climate strike later on in the day at 6 p.m. So many people inconvenience their daily lives, their workday, and the lives of businesses and corporations to call attention to this broad issue. Friday was a waking up, a reckoning, perhaps even an accounting for our world. In our gospel, we hear the story of a man who is having an accounting or a wake-up call himself. Our story is about a rich man, and in particular, the manager of this rich man's funds. Charges are brought to the rich man that this manager of his is squandering his funds. And so he is told to give an account of his work to the rich man. And even more than that, the rich man relinquishes the manager's power and says that he's out of a job. And we hear that the manager says he is not strong enough to dig and is too ashamed to beg. The manager is at risk of losing everything. So he gets creative. Some may call him stingy. And our gospel clearly points him out as dishonest. He goes to the debtors of the rich man and cuts his losses, saying, if you can't pay 100 jugs of oil, can you pay 50? Or if you can't pay 100 barrels of wheat, perhaps 80. And in doing this, he not only secures money for the rich man, but he does this to right his relationships with these debtors, so that when he no longer has a job, he may have a place to live when he's officially fired. What strikes me about this story is that the impending loss of this job seemed like it woke the manager up almost immediately. He became creative in order to find a place for himself to live. Jesus says, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. It seems unconventional that Jesus might be recommending bad business practices or lies, but Jesus goes on. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful in very much. And finally, we get to the meat of this story at the very end of our passage. You cannot serve God and wealth. This story isn't merely about the debtor's dishonesty or the user's dishonesty, but it's about the immorality of the rich man's scheme in the first place. No one, not even this manager, should be without a way to support themselves. And it seems like neither the manager nor the debtors are in positions that are healthy or sustainable for themselves or the community. I wonder then, how might we be faithful with our dishonest wealth? What are the ways in which we can use the power and privilege we have been given in our complicity or in our lives to make changes for the good of the earth and its people? Perhaps we are called to transform that dishonest wealth into something else. All over the world, people are coming to the cataclysmic realization that we are experiencing a climate crisis. We, like the manager, have not managed our affairs well, and the impacts have been frightening. We have lost species, our forests have been on fire, our hillsides, communities have experienced earthquakes from fracking. In the Bay Area, our sea life, our seals, and our sea lions have been poisoned by the pesticide runoff. Villages are sinking from rising sea levels. Like the manager, all of us are at risk of losing our own home, this earth. Many of us may not have been living in a just or sustainable way. And it can be easy to become overwhelmed by the state of our world. But perhaps instead, God is inviting us to act strangely or creatively, like this manager. I wonder, how might we cut our losses? Maybe we are being called to listen to these young protesters. They tell us that, yes, decreasing our use of straws and single-use plastics, or eating less red meat, or choosing to bike to work, these are all great things. But what really needs to change is our government, our businesses, our whole system and community's way of life. So how might we do this in our own lives? Perhaps it looks like moving our personal endowments or our pensions or the pensions of our nonprofits or companies into funds that are divested from fossil fuels. This may not be the best business practice, it might not have the best return, but in the long run, it might be more sustainable or loving to the people of this earth or to our neighbors. Perhaps it looks like bringing this information to our board meetings, to our diocesan conventions, writing letters to our politicians. Perhaps it looks like continuing to show up on Fridays at City Hall. However you are called into this work, this life, and this ministry, in this creative transfiguration, we are invited to shift our attention from the needs of a system that hurts our communities to a way of life that can sustain us in the long run. And I wonder, how might we envision and live into God's call for us to live rightly with the earth and with each other? Amen.